Hello, everybody. We're back again by popular demand. No expense spared on the Mr. Dwight Doodles. This is B1, something called mitosis. Mitosis is asexual reproduction. This exact opposite of sexual reproduction that comes under meiosis is paper two, but this is B1 mitosis. Once we put an A in front of something, it means the opposite. So it's the opposite to what sexual is. Now, recently, I burned myself by cooking myself a beautiful bit of sirloin steak on the hob, and some of the oil spat out of the pan and scalded me. And it destroyed the cells upon my arm. Now, this is what's happened is it's healed, and it's healed because of the process that we call mitosis. And the new cells that are produced are exactly the same. They're genetic clones of the cells that were originally there. Now, because it's asexual and not sexual, these cells down here, they don't need fertilizing by another cell. There don't need to be two parents in order to produce a cell there. What happens is we have one cell, and as we know from the very beginning of the module, we have our cell membrane, our cytoplasm, our nucleus. But inside that nucleus, we have 46 large molecules known as chromosomes. That's spelled wrong, that's better. Chromosomes. We have 46 of them. They come in pairs, 23 pairs. These chromosomes are made of DNA. And these sections of DNA on these big molecules, so I'm just going to draw one like that. If you separate the different sections of the DNA that make the chromosome, these are called genes, and genes code for characteristics. But more importantly, let's go back to the story, which is asexual reproduction, process called mitosis. And we've got one cell in my arm that has 46 chromosomes in it. I've burned myself, I cooked my steak, a nice bit of chimichurri sauce for those that know. It was worth the burn. And then what has happened is this one cell has now divided to become two new cells. But also in the nuclei of the two new cells are also 46 chromosomes. And once those cells come to maturity, those cells divide by mitosis once again. And inside those nuclei, you have 46 chromosomes in each. The word that is used to describe the daughter cells to these cells and the daughter cell to this cell is a word called diploid. Diploid refers to the new daughter cells having the exact same number of chromosomes as the parent cell. Once again, this is just when we grow and repair. So when we sleep, this is the process that occurs. I'm shortly going to go through this bad boy of a question that's worth 4 marks. It's given us a picture, and we have to describe the processes in the cell cycle. Doesn't even mention the word mitosis, but we can see here something funky is going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the tough science. I'm then going to answer the question, and then you're going to be an expert as to what goes on. On the previous bit of paper, I drew a cell, and in that cell, I wrote the number 46. That means it's got 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, and I mentioned the word diploid. That means that when that cell was created, it is identical to the cell that created it. So what inevitably has to happen is, if I was to draw 46 chromosomes, it would be an absolute mess. No one would know what's going on. So all I'm going to do is I am going to draw 4 chromosomes. There we are. Now you can see I've got 2 large and 2 small. Remember, these 46 chromosomes, they come in pairs. And obviously 46, a pair is 2, 46 divided by 2, we've got 23. So rather than draw 46, I'm just going to draw 2 pairs of 4 chromosomes. And inevitably, what has to happen is that has to divide to have the same number of chromosomes in the 2 new cells by asexual reproduction, mitosis. Diploid daughter cells. So this is what happens. Should be 46. I'm only drawing 4. Then I'm going to attempt to answer the big bad boy question. Right. I'm going to call that the parent. Remember, it's asexual. There is only one parent. Let's go to the next stage. So what happens next is I'm not going to bother drawing the cytoplasm. I'm just going to draw what happens in the nucleus. So the next thing that happens, so let's start again with our story of 4 chromosomes, 2 large, 2 small. You can see that that is identical to that. So the first thing that occurs is that the chromosomes divide, multiply, duplicate. Call it what you will. So in this stage, we have replication, multiplication, division of chromosomes. Let's see if I can spell it right this time. Of chromosomes. We had 1 strand, we now have 2 strands. That's the first thing. Then what happens? We move the cycle along. In the next phase, the chromosomes align upon what's called an equator. Now, the equator can be along on a horizontal or on a vertical. But because the question we're about to look at is on the horizontal, I'm going to do it on the horizontal. So what we get is the big chromosome. There's my little green on. The big green. Okay. Then we get the small green and the small purple. Do you notice that all that's happened is all the chromosomes have aligned across the equator, the middle of the nucleus? I'm going to have to move down on this next section here. So the next thing that happens is something very unique. I've lost my pens again. What am I doing? Losing the will. So we've got the first big purple here. Special proteins attach to the middle of the chromosomes, a bit like a spider's web. And what they do, once they attach to the center, they pull the chromosomes apart. So if I was to draw the equator on here, we're losing a bit of light, there we go. So inevitably, this one gets pulled upwards. So when it gets pulled, it looks a bit like that. Same occurs for the green. So here, this one will be pulled that way. And because it's being pulled that way, it looks a bit like that because they're being pulled. Then we've got the small green and the small green, and then the small purple and the small purple. So if we were to add those fibers on, it would look something like this, pulling them away from one another. Okay, let's move to the next part. Once they are pulled away from each other, you'll notice we've got one long purple on this side, one long purple on that side, one small purple, one small purple, one big green, and one small green. The next thing that happens is the nucleus starts to divide. And when it divides, we now have 2 nuclei. 2 nuclei. Let's call this cell 1, this one nuclei 1 and nuclei 2. Well, in this one, we get one big purple, one small purple, one small purple, one big green, and one small green. Now, if we look at the original cell, we do have 46. I drew 4, so it's easier to follow. Okay, 2 big in a pair, 2 small in a pair. We went around the cell cycle with the chromosomes duplicating. They moved to the equator of the cell, either on the horizontal or the vertical. Specialist proteins attach to the middle and pull the chromosomes apart. Then the nucleus divides along with the cytoplasm, and then we get 2 new cells. And if we look, the nuclei are identical to the parent cell. Then the cytoplasm would split, and then you would get 2 new cells identical to the parent, diploid number of chromosomes. There we go. So that's the hard science. Let's take a little look what a question will look like. Describe the processes in the cell cycle shown above. Well, the first thing is this is the process of mitosis. We're going to throw down some big words. It does say describe. That means that we have to list the events in a chronological order. So what is happening here? Well, if we look here, we're back to this section here. Remember, we're going from here to here. And you can see the single strands are duplicated. So DNA or chromosomes have duplicated or replicated or doubled. Okay, that's when we're going from here to here. We'll call that stage 1. Now, stage 2, remember what we do, are aligning in the center of the cell by the equator, and we're being pulled apart. So the next mark would be chromosomes, spelling it right now, align on the equator, proteins pull chromosomes apart towards the poles. Okay, all good. Then we get the nuclear division. We can see that here, and we can see that here in my little bad boy. And then finally, we get the cytoplasmic division, or we get 2 new cells that are diploid. Keep mentioning that. And what does diploid mean? Same number of chromosomes as the parent. Mr. Dwight Doodles signing off.